too much being made of what occurred last week here between our trade negotiators and China's?
I suspect so, David. This was a relatively minor set of understandings. In the broader scheme of things, a minor skirmish. And it would be good to get this put to bed and move on. But I think it leaves a huge range of uncertainties, questions, and unresolved issues in front of us.
When you say minor skirmish, what are you referring to?
I'm referring to the understandings which appear to have been reached regarding increasing agricultural imports by China and the postponement or delay of tariffs on certain Chinese exports, which were due to come into effect today. I think if you look at the full array of issues on the table here, these are not unimportant, but they don't represent the bulk of the problems that need to be resolved.
Right, and others have made similar points. What's your expectation then in terms of what will potentially get done and what will remain undone?
Well, I think if you step back and look at this, there are three large clusters of issues. There are the trade access issues, market access issues, which relate to both trade and investment. There are the issues relating to intellectual property, technology, and cybersecurity, which are perhaps going to be exceptionally difficult and thorny. And then there's issues relating to the structure of the Chinese economy, relating to subsidies, state ownership, et cetera. I think that both presidents would be well advised to separate these discussions into clusters. I think there's some hint of that with President Trump talking about phase one. But I think there need to be definitive understandings that are out in the marketplace so that investors can get past this tremendous cloud of not only uncertainty, David, but unpredictability, which is hindering global investment and is increasingly putting us at risk of a global recession.
Well, part of that, I think, Charles, does stem from simply the mixed messages we get on an almost daily basis. I don't know if you would agree, but even amongst the advisors to the president or those who are in the talks, it's not necessarily always cohesive.
You know, having been involved in a lot of trade negotiations myself, there are times to go public, but there are also times to keep these discussions inside closed doors. And I feel that perhaps that distinction is sometimes lost a little bit. And I think that's unfortunate because I think it adds to not only uncertainties, but unpredictability. And frankly, we're sailing the world economy very close to the shoals of a global recession. We just saw the markdown of global growth by the IMF. There's a lot of weakness out there. I just came back from Europe where the German economy is flat. I was just in the Southwest meeting with investors, leading investors in our country, and found them surrounded by almost paralysis regarding their own investment decisions. Companies like ours are bringing money to this country. We've invested over $15 billion of foreign capital in the last few years, but foreign investment into the U.S. has declined precipitously. We're not going to be able to keep this growth going if these trade issues continue with so many uncertainties. And I would say that if this continues for the next 6 months, the odds of a recession, unfortunately, are going to grow significantly.
The sets of issues that you lay out really have been the same for quite a while, right? It's not as if that has changed very much. So what does act as a trigger point? Is it we've been waiting perhaps for the Chinese economy to get to a point of stress that it changes their decision-making process? Hasn't really seemed to happen, though.
Well, it hasn't, Mike. The Chinese economy is clearly slowing. What we're finally beginning to see is not just their export machine beginning to slow. Their import machine is beginning to slow. I mean, if part of our objective here was to correct the bilateral trade deficit, we haven't made a lot of progress. I mean, imports by China from the U.S. were down precipitously last month, some 25%. And I think we are seeing a spreading of the weakness in the Chinese economy, not dramatically, but we're going to see slower growth this year. I think the real issue here is not so much whether the Chinese government panics because of slow growth. I don't see that happening. I think the issue is whether or not both leaders recognize that the longer this persists, the greater the uncertainties, and not just uncertainties, but unpredictability surrounding these issues is out there in the marketplace, the greater odds are that investment is going to decline to a point where consumer confidence begins to weaken. And at that point, we are in a recession.
So for the critics who say where we are right now is if we took the tariffs off, we could get the Chinese to buy as much ag as they were buying before the tariffs were even implemented. Is that too simplistic?
It is, but it's a fair point. Look, I think that obviously Chinese imports of our egg products are down dramatically. But it's not just the ag sector of our economy that's suffering. If these tariffs in December go into effect, the broader adverse effects on the U.S. consumer are going to be meaningful and significant for the first time in all of this trade war, in my view. I think the fact is that there are legitimate reasons to put pressure on China to focus on these three sets of issues. But if it were done in a more orderly and I would say more private fashion, I think the markets could regain some confidence and we could sustain this recovery for another couple of years. In the absence of that, as long as these uncertainties and unpredictabilities persist, I think it's hard to see that we're going to be able to sustain this recovery on into 2021.
I mean, judging, Charles, from what we've seen and what we expect, it sounds like you very well may expect a recession next year.
Well, I think the odds are sitting right around 50-50. I mean, firms like ours at Partners Group, we have to find a way to continue to put money to work, and we will.